It's wonderful to be here. I have run into the New Mexicans for Money Out of Politics starting about last year when I had this crazy idea. For those of you that don't know, I'm going to leave the details for you to Google. But we had a very contentious primary. HD 46 is 72% Democratic. It means that Republicans do not run there, and that generally they're either uncontested, which happens with far too many of our seats, or the battle is had in the primary and then it's over. In this particular case, I decided that that simply wasn't good enough. So I signed up. I am a Democrat, and I signed up to be a write-in candidate for House District 46 in the general election. First of all, on the advice route, don't do this. Do not sign up. Do not sign up to be a write-in candidate. It is a bit of an exercise in impossibility, name recognition. Your entire campaign, as far as fundraising, getting the word out, get out the vote, is very compressed, especially if you make the decision like I did in late June for an early November election. Still, I am proud of my endeavor. I thought that competition was needed, and that's what I offered. I did not win, clearly, because I'm not at the legislature right now. But I did gain the most write-in votes by a state legislative candidate in New Mexico history. Wow. So, thank you. And there were lots of insights along the way, and a lot of them have to do directly with money, how people are vetted and put in front of voters, and how you can accomplish a successful campaign. So the primary in question was completely ludicrous. Those of us in HD 46, there's a few of us in the room, we're receiving postcards and mailers on the order of one a day or every other day. And it really can wear you down as a voter to the point where you're just, I just don't even want to see this. I don't want to vote. I don't want to see anything more about the election. And so it's amazing what can go into something that we may consider small, which is a state legislative seat. All said and done, I haven't done the entire math, but I did know I was involved in the primary. I had supported one of those candidates, probably the one I didn't run against later. But the final tally of what that race cost was somewhere on the order of about $500,000. Because you're not just talking about whatever those candidates raise. You're talking about outside groups. They will do everything from radio ads to mailers. They will engage people to knock on doors. And so when you add it all up, it's a fairly obscene amount of money for a state legislative seat. So this is what I clearly decided to do at the end of June. And I will make the first comment in that this state does not have many political operatives and people to hire to run campaigns. This is especially true if you are not sort of going through the normal channels. If you are an independent candidate, if you are not, part of a party apparatus or something, it's nearly impossible to find people to even hire. I did do that. And found someone, and then I hired a full-time field coordinator that I had met along my journey. To give you some background, what I've been doing for the last 4 years is a lot of community advocacy, especially on issues of water and land rights. And so I wasn't a complete unknown in my community, and that makes a big difference. Getting name recognition is one of the big battles for someone that doesn't come the normal route. So I set off to run this campaign, and I was told to expect to have to raise about $70,000 to $80,000 in fundraising. And that would have been in the months of July, August, September, and October, so 4 months. This is a tall order, and $70 to $80,000. I actually did pretty well for the unconventional, shall we say, campaign. My first month, we raised about $20,000. And we were able to do this partly because I had a network in my community where I had been advocates for people. So if you are going to run a campaign, you always start with a list of your family and friends. That's the, and they may get sick of you after a while, but they'll forgive you usually. I did not accept, I had one PAC donation. It was not a corporate PAC. It was a legacy PAC. It was the Luciano Lucky Varela PAC, which Lucky's family asked me to write a letter asking why I wanted to serve, and then they sent me a check. You will get unsolicited PAC donations, corporate donations. I did not accept those. My opponents, when they had very little on me, tried to make something of a $50 check from a local woman who runs a dog training company, which had LLC at the end. I assure you this was not a corporate donation. And one interesting thing that goes on, and I've had this talk with a lot of the Wolfpack people, is what do you mean by corporate money? And this for me has always been a little bit mysterious, right? Because Wolfpack says no corporate money, and I say, but if there's a local small business and they're incorporated, does that mean I should not? I'm a big proponent of supporting local small businesses. So there's a lot of nuance in what are you going to accept, what's okay for you, what's not okay for you. And then when I was asked about this particular talk, I think the wording originally said wealthy individuals. Now, I personally think that if I am lucky enough to have friends that are wealthy individuals who are not representing a special interest or a corporate interest, that is an okay donation to take. I did take a couple. I don't know that many rich people. So when you're running on a shoestring budget, let me just say that many campaign things are very expensive. In our district, it's about the full universe, if you were going to do a mailer, is about 25,000 voters. And so for a mailer, a nice, professional, all those glossy things we got every day would cost you on the order of $6,000 to $8,000 per mailing. You can understand how this adds up really, really quickly. On strategies, I think things that are often overlooked that can be very effective, social media can be huge, and advertising on social media is actually pretty reasonable. If you run a Facebook ad, you can actually get your message in front of a lot of people for not so much money. And radio is especially effective in parts of the district I'm in. And to give you a little perspective, HD 46 is a very unique district. It starts in Española, in Sombrío and Santa Cruz, and it covers all of the Santa Fe County areas of Española, Poaque, Chimayo, Cundio, all through the Poaque Valley. It then goes up to Tesuque, Rio Medio, Bishop's Lodge, and then it cuts across, goes to Las Campanas, goes through Casa Solana, and then into large swaths of western, so along Agua Fria. It goes all the way down to near where Meow Wolf is, bordered by Cerrillos, and then they carved out 2 precincts somewhere along Cerrillos there. So it is completely crazy, just by the by. It is a large geographical area. And some parts of it are, of course, readily, you can go knock on doors, some of the city parts. Out in the country, not so much. You're going to have to do mail, you're going to have to do phone. Places like Las Campanas, you can't knock on a door. You've got a bunch of locked gates. So you have to use different strategies depending on what your district really looks like. In the rural areas, and especially in the north where I'm from, Radio is very effective, especially for people that are very, very likely to vote. So our older electorate in northern New Mexico, they turn the radio on in the morning, they get their news, they listen to the ads. I did run some advertising both in Santa Fe and Espanola in English and in Spanish. Despite what I look like, I am half Hispanic, and so that wasn't contrived. That was actually, I may have had Mom check my grammar, but it was very interesting to see what sort of worked and didn't. And as I said, I don't suggest that anyone go this particular route. It was a run for me on a matter of principle. And I still don't consider myself a politician of any sort. So on a personal note, what I am now doing since that run, I continue to advocate on local issues. I have joined the board of New Mexico Open Primaries. So I saw a lot of these people trying to get HB 93 passed, because I believe that more people involved in voting is always a good thing. And so I will continue to fight on that. Ethics and transparency is, of course, really huge. And if you read the whole story of HD 46, you will understand why this is so personal to me. So we were very happy to hear that about midnight last night, HB 4, what was HB 4, sorta, got through finally, and then we will have an ethics commission. I am a little bit dismayed at parts of that bill, and so I'm not going to go into a large legislative update, but I will say the good things about that bill is that they did get subpoena power, is what, I haven't read the final version, but subpoena power was a big deal. And complaints need to be made under oath, which is another pretty big deal. And there's the openness once they find cause. So those are great. Once you do Google HD 46, you will find out that much of what happened had to do with a complaint regarding harassment. There is a legislative policy that covers harassment of all types, whether it be run-of-the-mill harassment or sexual harassment. And that is a separate policy and procedure that is wholly within the power of the legislative body. I find this problematic for a number of reasons. It's bound to get political one way or another, and I definitely don't agree with policing yourself. The current Ethics Commission will not handle any harassment claims. Those are not set in statute and therefore are not subject to the rules of the commission. And I would hope that there is a way in future to make sure that all of our ethics complaints are handled with the same independence and care that the GIFT Act and the Campaign Finance Act are. But yeah, I still consider it a big win. For New Mexicans, it's a start. We know that through Diana Duran and Jerome Block and Phil Griego, I can tell you that our corruption problem in New Mexico does not have a party. It does not care. And that we should all be very concerned with corruption and with the backroom deals that often happen in New Mexico politics. So just as a poll here, the first time I met New Mexico for Many Out of Politics, I was actually at their opening for a documentary called Dark Money. Did anybody here see that? Yeah, show of hands, no?
I've seen it,
yes,
but it's
no?
not there.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest everyone do that if they haven't. I made a quick check. If you are an Amazon Prime member, you can watch it anytime you want through Prime. If you are not a Prime member, I think it's $3.99 to...
Like $1.99 if you don't need high definition. It's just like
okay.
I think it's also available free on videos.pbs.org. I'm not sure, but I think it's...
I think that expired.
Oh.
That was for a time. It was on PBS, and I think that ended in end of October.
Oh, okay.
But still, I mean, $1.99 is a good investment to get that information. And so I've talked about how all these outside forces that inject money, and it's really super important because we can now all go to the Secretary of State and you can look at every dime that I personally received as a candidate. So you'll get a name, you'll get an address. If it's over $150, you'll get what that person does for a living. And so our campaign reporting is actually pretty good. I consider this one of the, actually, the things that works. The problem is the side doors, right? And so you have things called independent expenditures, which means someone can just inject money. They just have to declare it. But they'll have to do it in a way, in a timing, where they'll do it right after a reporting period and where they do not need to report it until 2 days before the election. So you have no idea where this money is coming from. All you know is that something's on the airwaves telling everybody how awful you are, or so on and so forth. I think we can do better on reporting, especially on these issues. But if you did see dark money, then you basically saw the conservative effort to buy seats for legislators with a very particular agenda. That's it in a nutshell. But I want you to know that I believe this also doesn't have a party. And so I'm happy to put these out on a link later, but I've brought a couple of things to show you that the progressive movement and the Democratic Party does the same sorts of things. This is a report, and I'm happy to send it to the MOP people, that's available online. And this started in 2007 and was a strategy for some states within the United States to start having progressive wins. And what it does is it shifts money away from your typical corporate donors, and it puts it in the hands of loosely coupled special interests, okay? Much like dark money was a right to work, sort of Tea Party agenda group of people, this is the flip side. And it was tried in a few states since 2007. New Mexico was one of them. And it describes in here exactly who sort of started to work together in order to get these wins. And so there's sort of this umbrella group that then coordinates a number of 501c4s and 501c3s in order to win elections. Now, this is actually pretty brilliant thinking from a data standpoint, right? You've got people that definitely have a reason to go to elections, and you've already got a database. You've also got a fundraising base. And I think that the danger in not realizing that this is nonpartisan is that when I've talked to certain groups of my friends, people have a tendency to say, oh, but that's okay because I agree with that. And so for me, I think we really need to draw a line in the sand to say, you know, dark money is dark money. There are no different shades of dark money. There's not red dark money and blue dark money. It's all green and it's all dark money. And we have to be ready as the electorate to say, we want to know at the very least who is paying to do this. Because every time that a special interest group of any flavor or ideology injects themselves into our elections, that means that they're getting a say, and they're usually getting more of a say than us as voters. And so I'm very passionate about closing these loopholes that allow people to sink large amounts of money in that we either never find out where they came from, or we find out when it's too late to make our minds up. So this is really good reading to see kind of the mechanics of how it works. There's also this book, and I'm happy, sorry, it's got a couple of coffee stains on it at this point. But this is a book that's similar. It's called The Blueprint, and this was specifically about Colorado's movement to do this. and to win progressive seats. They were fantastically successful in flipping Colorado from red to blue. And this explains how they did it, through a similar collaboration between a number of special interests that kind of sort of aligned. And of course we want to support interests that we are passionate about. I do it myself. But you will learn that often the tactics used are not savory and they're not honest. And I think that's another part of drawing our own line where we say, this is beyond the line, and we're not going to stand for this as the electorate. The last thing I'll mention as sort of a resource is that recently I ran into something called Represent Us, and it is an anti-corruption platform that I've been looking into, and it touches on money, but it also touches on, the lots of other parts, making elections more open. Yeah, and fixing basically a broken system, because you and I as voters sometimes have very little impact on our outcomes in my mind, and this is something that should make us all angry, I believe. So I'll continue to fight those fights, but there is no local Represent Us chapter. I think our closest might be Denver.
So we're actually talking with him about that right now.
Yeah, and I think that while money is a huge part of what is broken right now, I've never believed it could be fixed in that vacuum. So this goes to your original question of, well, why do we care about voting rights and these other things that aren't directly money? And it's precisely because you have to fix the whole system, right? You have to make sure that every vote counts and that no one is suppressing votes, and you have to fix the money game. And you have to do it all at once. You have to make sure that the right reporting gets done. So we had a fair number of wins this session, and I hope to build upon that. And that was sort of what I had planned. Let me just make sure I didn't prepare anything. Oh, 501c4s. I want to have a little talk about 501c4s, and then I think we can move on. So the 501c4 is actually called a social welfare organization. And so as a 501c3 does charity work, and they're not allowed to be political, as was said in the beginning. They can do some advocacy work on issues, but they're not allowed to, say, endorse or anything of the sort. A 501c4 is quite different. A 501c4 may endorse candidates, put money into elections. They often have their own PAC where they can then feed certain things like radio ads and direct mailers and any sort of political activity. And the kicker of it is that a 501c4 is not required to tell you who gave them the money at all. And herein lies the problem. Because, believe it or not, over the past few years, the power of the corporate PAC has been much diminished. They're not donating as much as they used to, that we know of. Now, maybe they're simply funneling it through a 501c4. Why would they do that? Because they're not required to say who they are. So you have a social welfare organization, and they'll have a mission that's something like engage X and such type voter, and, do community X and Y. But they are the ones that are running radio ads for certain candidates and funneling large amounts of money in. And we don't have any right to see who those are. So how do you fix this? I am not a legislator. I believe this would probably have to happen in the tax code, even at a higher level than the state, because this is a federal designation. But I think we should be able to see who is funding these efforts. They are enormous sums of money that come into these organizations. I have looked at some of the ones that were involved in New Mexico and are especially active in New Mexico, and it really is millions and millions and millions of dollars. And you have no idea who gave them that money. So it can be anything from, you know, the Cook brothers, maybe it's a Bloomberg initiative, someone with just lots of cash to spread around. And whether I agree with them or not, I think I should get to know who they are that wants me to vote that way. So that's what I had prepared. I'm happy to answer questions. Yes, Yashwari.
The 501c4 that you were just describing, is that the same as super PACs?
No. A 501c4 will often have an associated PAC, but they are supposed to be separate. And so under the rules, the 501c4 can do the more political type advocacy work, but they'll often have a separate PAC arm. And they're not supposed to coordinate with any candidate directly. So that's one of the rules, right? It's hard to see that they're actually following that rule, to be honest. For an example, if you look at New Mexico's sort of nebulous, the umbrella thing is called the Center for Civic Policy, which is a 501c4 based out of Albuquerque. And then they have I'm sorry. It's confusing. One of them is a C3 and one of them is a C4. Center for Civic Policy, Center for Civic Action. And then they have associated PACs. So as far as I can tell, it's very much like the dark money picture, right? You have this feeder money that comes in, this place where they never have to say where it came from. And then from there it gets funneled to a C3 maybe even, or a PAC, and then it gets used to tell you, you should vote for this person. And the problem is the opacity. The problem is that we don't really know who's behind that. And so it's a little bit more, to trace it, sometimes it goes back and forth and sideways and then what appears to be around in a circle. And it's, you know, this is why, although I strongly disagree with what Citizens United did, fixing Citizens United will not fix our problems. And so I think we need to take, and who knows, maybe they'll find another loophole, right? Once we seal that one, it's kind of like the old cartoons with the dam, and you're doing one leak and you do another and another spurts. But I feel like we should try to tackle both of these, because PACs and super PACs will often give large sums of money to these 501c4s. And then what? Like, how do you even trace that? In the case of the Center for Civic Policy, they do have some connections to some very large super PACs in DC. As far back as I could trace them, it was kind of part of the nebulous Richardson era group, and perhaps some Bloomberg money coming in. Bloomberg was certainly involved with the soda tax initiative, and some of these groups that are described in these. So you can take a guess at where they came from, but you won't know for sure.
So what is that document? You never really told us.
This came out of a meeting.
Well,
they were called it's called the State Strategies Fund, and so what they were doing is they were planning how to run the 501c4s and C3s to win more progressive, to get more progressives in office, basically. And what it does is there were how many states on here?
It's a national group.
Yes, and so there's 5 or 6 states. And it was sort of an experiment. So they were saying, in this state and this state, we're going to try to use 501c4s. But in this state and this state, we're going to maybe mix it up and use C3s and C4s. And so this is more about strategy and how they envisioned this umbrella connected.
And of course, other organizations do this too. This is not strictly limited to like this particular organization of liberal folks or progressives.
No.
Conservatives do as well.
And this is my point in showing it, is I'm not trying to tell you anyone's good or bad. What was described in Dark Money describes this sort of scheme in conservative circles and with conservative groups. My only point in this is, don't forget that no one has the corner on this. Everyone who has an agenda can do this, and certainly organize.
Now, I haven't read it, but doesn't HB1 try to deal with this? HB1 is a national bill that the House has already passed.
Oh, Tom Udall's thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's not Tom
The House
Udall's thing.
campaign.
It came out of the House, but it
Yeah.
deals with voter registration. If it votes, I think it deals with the Dark Money thing too. I'm not positive. Are you not?
So I think that most people are going after the Citizens United piece of Dark Money, right? The big PAC donations. I haven't looked at all the details. And is it a bill or a memorial?
No, it's a bill.
It is a bill.
And it already passed the House. And McConnell refuses to bring it up in the Senate.
Right. I don't believe it's going to be a total fix for this 501c3 and C4 issue without some changes to our tax code. It will seal up the problem created by Citizens United, which is unlimited donations to super PACs and that part of it. But this would still remain, on paper they're charities, like the Salvation Army clothing people, or, I mean, we can go on to the moral way of how we say these are good organizations or not. That's not my job. But what you'll find is that they have a political clout, and they're feeding that money directly into races and into partisan politics in a way that I'm not comfortable with. And I think it's on the progressive side, and certainly the Koch brothers have been doing it for, of course, a very long time. And so I didn't want to color it red or blue, but just to let you know that there's both. So.
Well, we have time probably for one more question. Just looking at the clock.
Yes, Sheila.
Do you have a full-time job as well as all your involvement in politics?
Yeah, so I was actually talking this morning to someone, and I was telling them that I have a problem saying no to people. I hold a full-time job at Los Alamos National Lab. I work in nuclear safeguards. I spent 5 years at the International Atomic Energy Agency doing remote monitoring for the weapons inspectors there. And so I am always busy. My husband's a bit annoyed with me, but I don't have children. So I will put that qualifier in there. I only have 3 dogs. But yeah, I work in Los Alamos, and that makes getting to Santa Fe a little bit more challenging, especially in the week.
And what was it that inspired you, or, I mean, was it just a gradual aversion, or did something really trigger your involvement in politics?
Oh, okay. So actually, this will be a great story because I love telling this story. So the reason I'm involved in politics is Sarah Palin. And I'm serious. Up to 2008, I voted. That was about what I did. And that summer evening when they announced Sarah Palin as vice presidential campaign, I got up the next day and I went to the local Obama campaign office and I said, "What do you need?" And I was a big part of that campaign in 2008 through the Espanola office. I worked all over northern New Mexico for the campaign, and then worked the election. And then, unfortunate timing, I left just a few days before his inauguration and missed 5 full years of the Obama presidency because I was in Vienna at that time. That's when I moved to Europe. So when I came back and I bought a home where I grew up in the Poaque Valley, there were a lot of really complex, really hard problems to deal with in that community. And I began working in a 501c3 on water and land issues, and that's what I had been doing for the 4 years preceding this. I never intended to run for office, however. I think I'm a bit too blunt for that, and I kind of always say what I mean and think. But I'm not sorry that I did it, and I encourage other people to, so.